The coffee in Rebecca Torres's cup rippled before she heard the alarm. As director of the Global Space Monitoring Network, she had learned to trust her instincts, and right now every nerve in her body screamed that something was terribly wrong. The screens across the command center flickered once, twice, then displayed an image that would haunt humanity forever. Captain David Park was 400 kilometers above Earth on the International Research Station when his communications officer, Lieutenant Emma Bradshaw, grabbed his shoulder with trembling hands. Her dark eyes reflected the impossible sight on the monitor before them. Through the reinforced windows, they could see 12 massive vessels emerging from what looked like tiers in space itself. The ships were pyramidal, each one larger than Manhattan, their surfaces darker than the void around them. Professor Richard Okonkwo was teaching quantum physics to a classroom of eager students in Lagos when every screen in the university simultaneously switched to the same broadcast. His students fell silent as an entity appeared before them. It stood nearly 3 meters tall, its body covered in crystalline plates that shifted through colors no human eye should be able to perceive. 4 arms extended from its torso, each ending in delicate manipulators that moved with unsettling grace. This is High Chancellor Dravix of the Celestial Supremacy. The creature spoke, and impossibly, everyone heard it in their native language. Your species has been observed for the duration of your modern civilization. We have studied your capacity for violence, your technological progression, your social structures. The conclusion has been reached. Earth will now serve the supremacy. General Patricia Moss was in a strategy meeting at the North American Defense Complex when armed guards burst through the doors. Her aide, Colonel Thomas Wright, was already pulling up tactical displays before she could ask what was happening. What she saw made her stomach drop. The 12 alien vessels had positioned themselves in perfect geometric formation around Earth's equator. The terms are simple. Chancellor Dravix continued, his crystalline face showing no emotion. You will surrender 60% of all extracted minerals and metals. 40% of your agricultural output will be redirected to supremacy distribution networks. 1 billion of your population, selected for optimal genetic diversity and physical capability, will be relocated to serve in our labor colonies. Your military forces will be dismantled. Compliance must begin within 10 planetary rotations. In a small apartment in Mumbai, aerospace engineer Priya Sharma watched the broadcast while holding her 6-year-old daughter. Around the world, billions of people experienced the same moment of crushing realization. They were no longer alone in the universe, and their new neighbors had come not as friends, but as conquerors. To demonstrate the consequences of defiance. Chancellor Dravix gestured with one of his 4 arms. The display changed to show a lush world of purple oceans and emerald continents. Beautiful cities of silver spires dotted the landscape. Then the perspective shifted to orbit, where vessels identical to those now surrounding Earth moved into position. What followed lasted exactly 7 minutes. Energy beams of impossible intensity lanced down from the pyramid ships. Where they touched, matter ceased to exist. Mountains evaporated. Oceans turned to superheated steam. Cities became expanding clouds of plasma. When it ended, the planet was a lifeless ball of cooling magma. This was Talvarin Prime, the Chancellor stated flatly. Population 9 billion. They chose resistance. Their civilization had existed for 8,000 years. It took us less time to erase them than you spend eating a meal. Rebecca Torres forced herself to breathe. Her second-in-command, Hassan Abdel, was already coordinating with military networks worldwide. But what could Earth possibly do? Their most advanced spacecraft could barely reach Mars. These aliens had just crossed interstellar space and demonstrated the ability to destroy an entire planet in minutes. Your species shows potential. Chancellor Dravix continued. Your capacity for organized violence is impressive by galactic standards. Your rate of technological advancement is acceptable. This is why you are offered servitude rather than extinction. But understand this truth clearly. The supremacy has conquered 462 worlds. 73 civilizations chose to resist. None survived. You are not special. You are not unique. You are resources to be allocated. Captain Park watched through the station windows as one of the pyramid ships rotated slowly. The movement was precise, mechanical, utterly controlled. Emma Bradshaw was trying to get communications with Earth Defense Command, but every channel was flooded with panic and confusion. Professor Okonkwo stood frozen as his students began to cry. Some prayed. Others sat in shocked silence. But in the back of the classroom, a young woman named Grace Obi was not crying. She was taking notes, her face set in determined concentration. The professor caught her eye and saw something that gave him a spark of hope. She was already thinking, already analyzing, already refusing to accept defeat. General Moss pulled up Earth's defense inventory. Every nuclear weapon, every missile system, every military satellite. Against what they had just witnessed, it all seemed pathetically inadequate. But Colonel Wright was highlighting something on a secondary screen. "Ma'am, you need to see this. It's flagged Black Level Classification. I've never even heard of this program." The broadcast continued with Chancellor Dravix listing specific requirements. Mining operations in the Andean mountain ranges. Agricultural tithes from the grain belts of 3 continents. The first group of 1 million humans to be processed for off-world labor assignment within 3 rotations. Each demand was delivered with the same emotionless precision. Rebecca Torres received an encrypted message on a channel she did not know existed. It was from somewhere in the Rocky Mountains, a facility with no official designation. The message contained 3 words that changed everything. Prometheus is ready. Around the world, in bunkers and command centers and university laboratories, certain people received similar messages. Scientists who had been working on projects no government would publicly acknowledge. Military officers assigned to experimental programs that officially did not exist. Engineers who had been solving problems that should not have been solvable. They all began moving toward secret locations, carrying knowledge that humanity's leaders had hoped would never be needed. Chancellor Dravix concluded his broadcast with a final statement. Your compliance will be monitored. Any attempt at military resistance will result in targeted destruction of population centers. We will begin with cities of 10 million or more inhabitants. Your leaders have 10 rotations to organize the tribute. Fail to comply, and your species will be reduced to pre-industrial population levels. This is not negotiation. This is instruction. The screens went dark, returning to normal broadcasts. But nothing was normal anymore. The alien ships remained in orbit, silent and motionless, like weapons waiting to be fired. General Moss stared at the classified file Colonel Wright had uncovered. The program was called Project Starfire, and according to the brief description, it had been running for 17 years. Its stated purpose made her heart race with possibility. Asymmetric response to existential threat. Professor Okonkwo dismissed his class early. As the students filed out in stunned silence, Grace Obi approached his desk. "Sir," she said quietly, "they made a mistake." The professor looked at her questioningly. "They gave us 10 days," Grace continued. "They think we need time to organize our surrender. But what if we use it to organize something else?" In orbit, Captain Park gathered his crew. Emma Bradshaw had finally established secure communications with multiple ground facilities. What she was hearing made her eyes widen. "David, there are programs. Secret programs. Things they built just in case someone like these aliens showed up." The captain looked out at the pyramid ships. "Good," he said grimly. "Because if humanity is going down, we are taking these invaders with us." Rebecca Torres stood in her command center. surrounded by screens showing worldwide panic. But she was not panicking. She was calculating. The message from Prometheus had included coordinates and a single instruction: gather the defenders. She began making calls to people whose names appeared on no official roster, whose work existed in facilities that were not on any map. The supremacy had given Earth 10 days. They were about to learn that humans were very good at making use of every second. The transport plane carrying General Patricia Moss descended into what appeared to be an ordinary mountain valley in Colorado. But as they dropped below the cloud line, Colonel Thomas Wright pointed to something impossible. The entire valley floor was shimmering, like heat waves rising from summer pavement, except it was November and snowing. "That is a holographic projection field," the pilot explained over the intercom. "What you are about to see does not officially exist." Rebecca Torres arrived 6 hours later on a different aircraft. She was escorted through security checkpoints that scanned her in ways she could not identify. The technology looked nothing like conventional metal detectors or X-ray machines. One device hummed with a frequency that made her teeth ache. Another passed a blue light over her body that somehow felt warm and cold simultaneously. When she asked what they were scanning for, the guard simply replied, "Everything." Professor Richard Okonkwo received his invitation through an encrypted quantum channel that hijacked his laptop screen. The message came from Dr. Helena Kim, a theoretical physicist who had supposedly died in a laboratory accident 5 years ago. Except here she was, very much alive, telling him to pack for an indefinite stay at coordinates that placed him somewhere beneath the Rocky Mountains. When he arrived, Helena greeted him with a tired smile and the words he would never forget. "Welcome to the place where we break the laws of physics because we wrote better ones." The facility was designated Site Archimedes. Though everyone simply called it the Forge, it existed 22 levels below ground, carved from solid granite and reinforced with materials that had no names in any periodic table. Captain David Park and Lieutenant Emma Bradshaw were brought down from the space station via a shuttle that moved faster than anything NASA had ever built. The craft did not use conventional rocket engines. Instead, it seemed to fold space around itself, making the distance between orbit and ground simply become shorter. They all gathered in a briefing room that defied conventional geometry. The walls were not quite perpendicular to the floor. The ceiling seemed farther away when you looked at it than when you glanced up casually. Professor Okonkwo felt nauseated until Dr. Kim handed him a small device to wear on his wrist. "It is a spatial anchor," she explained. "Keeps your inner ear from trying to process dimensions." It was not built to understand. General Moss stood at the front of the room beside a woman in a black uniform with silver insignia that matched no military branch on. "Earth, this is Director Samantha Cross," the general announced. "For the past 17 years, she has been running the most classified program in human history. What you are about to learn is so secret that until yesterday, only 43 people on the entire planet knew it existed." Director Cross activated a holographic display that filled the center of the room. Images appeared of spacecraft that looked sleek and predatory, weapons that bent light around them, soldiers in armor that seemed alive. When the Kepler Space Telescope discovered the first confirmed exoplanet in 2009, Cross began, we received something else. A signal, not from aliens trying to communicate, but a data packet. Raw information about something called quantum substrate manipulation. Priya Sharma, the aerospace engineer from Mumbai, had been recruited 2 days ago after her classified research on exotic propulsion caught someone's attention. She leaned forward, fascinated. "You are saying aliens accidentally sent us their technology?" "Not aliens," Dr. Kim interjected. "At least not biological ones. We think it was an automated probe from a civilization that no longer exists." The data was incomplete, fragmented, but it contained something revolutionary. Instructions for editing reality at the quantum level. Colonel Wright shook his head. That sounds like science fiction. Director Cross smiled. So did heavier than air flight until 1903. So did splitting the atom until 1945. So did quantum computing until last decade. We have had 17 years to turn science fiction into science fact. She gestured to the hologram. This is the Phantom Fleet. 37 ships that exist in a quantum superposition state. Captain, Park studied the vessels displayed before him. They looked organic, almost biological, with hulls that seemed to shift and flow. What does quantum superposition mean for a spaceship? It means they exist in multiple places at once until observed, Dr. Kim explained. You cannot shoot what you cannot pin down to a single location. And when they do collapse into our reality to attack, they can choose any position within a light-second radius. Try targeting that with conventional weapons. Rebecca Torres was connecting pieces in her mind. The ripple in my coffee before the alarms went off. That was not just vibration. You were already powering up these ships, weren't you? Director Cross nodded. We began activation protocols the moment our deep space sensors detected the Supremacy Fleet entering the solar system. We had 3 hours warning before they reached Earth orbit. General Moss pulled up tactical data on her tablet. 37 ships against 12 pyramid vessels. We are outnumbered, and they have already proven they can destroy planets. Director Cross walked to a different section of the holographic display. Then let me introduce you to Project Mongoose. The room reconfigured to show a weapon system. Unlike anything they had seen. It looked like a massive ring, 2 kilometers in diameter, floating in what appeared to be an artificial pocket dimension. Energy swirled inside the ring in patterns that hurt to look at directly. This is a causality inverter, explained a new voice. They all turned to see a young man in his late 20s approaching. He had dark circles under his eyes and moved with the caffeinated energy of someone who had not slept properly in days. This is Dr. Nathan Cross, Director Cross said with obvious pride. My son and the youngest person to ever earn 3 doctorates. He figured out how to make this monstrosity work. Nathan gestured enthusiastically at the weapon. Most weapons destroy their target by adding energy. Explosions, heat, kinetic force. But what if instead you convinced the universe that the target never had structural integrity in the first place? You do not break it. You make reality remember it is already broken. Professor Okonkwo felt his understanding of physics crumbling. That should be completely impossible. Nathan grinned. Correct. It violates causality, conservation of energy, and probably 3 other fundamental laws. But here is the thing about fundamental laws. They are more like strong suggestions if you know the right loopholes. Lieutenant Bradshaw raised her hand like she was back in school. How does any of this help us against enemies who can turn planets into molten rock? Director Cross expanded the holographic display to fill the entire room. They all found themselves floating in a simulation of space with Earth below and the 12 supremacy vessels arranged in their geometric formation above. Watch, Cross commanded. The simulation fast-forwarded. The Phantom Fleet appeared from nowhere, 37 ships materializing in impossible positions around the enemy. But they were not attacking. Instead, each human vessel was projecting some kind of field. The fields interconnected, forming a web of energy that encompassed all 12 pyramid ships. Then reality inside that web started to change. The pyramid ships began to age. Thousands of years passed in seconds. Their hulls corroded, their systems failed, their power cores decayed into inert matter. Within 2 minutes of simulation time, the mighty vessels of the celestial supremacy were nothing but ancient derelicts. Their crews long dead from accelerated time. Their weapons as useless as Bronze Age spears. Priya Sharma whispered in Hindi, then switched to English. You built a weapon that makes time move faster for anything caught inside it. Not exactly, Nathan replied. We created a localized field that increases entropy specifically for artificial structures, while leaving organic matter relatively unaffected. Those ships age 10,000 years in 2 minutes. But a human standing on one would only age about 6 months. Still fatal eventually, but it gives our boarding teams time to work. Boarding teams? Captain Park stood straighter. You are planning to capture their vessels? General Moss took over the briefing. The Supremacy made a critical mistake. They assumed we would either surrender or try to fight using conventional tactics. They positioned themselves in a pattern optimal for planetary bombardment, but terrible for mutual defense. They are spread out, making it impossible for them to support each other quickly. Colonel Wright was studying the tactical display with growing appreciation. You are going to hit them all simultaneously, before they can warn each other or regroup. Director Cross nodded. The attack begins in 4 days. We need that time to complete final preparations and brief the assault teams. Captain Park, Lieutenant Bradshaw, you will be commanding 2 of our Phantom vessels. Your experience in orbital operations makes you invaluable, but there is more, Dr. Kim added. She pulled up schematics of human soldiers in extraordinary armor. These are Vanguard suits, powered exoskeletons enhanced with the same quantum technology as our ships. A soldier wearing one of these can phase through solid matter, redirect kinetic energy, and access a localized quantum computer that predicts enemy movements 3 seconds into the future. Rebecca Torres finally spoke up. This is incredible, but how do we know it will work? You have been testing in secret, but they have been conquering worlds for who knows how long. Director Cross met her eyes steadily. You are right to be cautious. We do not know if it will work. But here is what we do know. The Supremacy has fought 462 wars. Every single opponent tried to beat them at their own game. Conventional ships against their ships. Energy weapons against their shields. No one ever tried to change the game itself. That is humanity's advantage. We are insane enough to rewrite the rules. Professor Okonkwo thought of his student Grace Obai and her determination not to accept defeat. When do we begin training? Nathan Cross pulled up a schedule. No. You have 96 hours to learn how to operate technology that should not exist. Crew ships that violate physics, and coordinate an attack against an enemy that has never lost. His grin was slightly manic. No pressure, though. As the briefing concluded, and people began moving toward their assigned training sections, General Moss pulled Director Cross aside. You have been planning this for 17 years. You built all this before we even knew aliens existed. How did you know we would need it? Cross looked at the holographic display, still showing Earth surrounded by enemy vessels. I did not know, General, but I understood something fundamental about the universe. We are not alone out here, and our neighbors might not be friendly. Hoping for peace is wise, but preparing for war is survival. 17 years ago, I decided humanity would never be the victim. If someone came to take our world, we would make them regret it. The general watched as Captain Park and Lieutenant Bradshaw suited up for their first flight in a Phantom vessel. What if we lose? What if all this incredible technology still is not enough? Then we lose fighting, Cross replied quietly. But the Supremacy is about to learn an important lesson. You can conquer a species that surrenders. You can destroy a species that fights conventionally. But you cannot break a species that refuses to accept the possibility of defeat. Humanity has spent 10,000 years killing each other in increasingly creative ways. These aliens have no idea what they just picked a fight with. The countdown clock in the operations center displayed 72 hours remaining when Captain David Park first stepped into his Phantom vessel. The ship responded to his presence like a living thing, systems humming to life before he touched a single control. Lieutenant Emma Bradshaw stood beside him in the hangar, staring up at the craft designated Wraith 7. It looked predatory and elegant, its hull seeming to ripple with contained energy. She reached out to touch it, and her hand passed through the surface before the ship, solidified around her fingers. Professor Richard Okonkwo spent his training hours learning something that contradicted everything he had taught for 20 years. Reality was not fixed. Dr. Helena Kim showed him equations that proved the universe was more like clay than concrete, waiting to be shaped by those who understood the language of quantum mechanics. In a testing chamber, he watched a young technician named James Chun turn a steel block into water, then into light, then back into steel, all by changing the underlying quantum information that defined what the material was. The transformation took 6 seconds and violated conservation of mass, energy, and common sense. Priya Sharma found herself working alongside engineers who spoke casually about folding space and borrowing energy from parallel dimensions. A woman named Dr. Yuki Tanaka explained how the phantom ships moved by convincing the universe that their destination was actually their current location, making distance itself negotiable. Priya had designed propulsion systems her entire career, but this was something else entirely. This was not engineering. This was teaching physics to lie convincingly in the tactical center. General Patricia Moss coordinated with Colonel Thomas Wright and Rebecca Torres. They had detailed maps of each supremacy pyramid vessel, compiled from passive scans over the past 4 days. The alien ships maintained their geometric formation, utterly still, confident in their invincibility. That confidence would be their downfall. Director Samantha Cross joined them, followed by her son Nathan, who carried a tablet displaying real-time quantum calculations. The assault would happen in 3 phases. First, the Phantom Fleet would emerge from quantum superposition simultaneously around all 12 enemy vessels, deploying the entropy fields before the supremacy could react. Second, boarding teams in Vanguard armor would phase through the aging hulls to secure key systems and prevent the aliens from triggering any doomsday weapons. Third, if everything went according to plan, humanity would capture intact examples of technology from a civilization that had conquered hundreds of worlds. Captain Park ran simulation after simulation. Each time, his ship performed maneuvers that should have torn it apart from acceleration forces. But the Phantom vessels did not push through space. They edited their position in reality's source code, making momentum and inertia irrelevant. Emma Bradshaw practiced weapons targeting, learning to fire while her ship existed in multiple locations simultaneously. The quantum computer predicted where enemies would be, allowing her to shoot at positions they had not reached yet. The training was brutal and beautiful. People who had never met before formed teams with instinctive coordination. A former Special Forces operator named Marcus Leone learned to phase through walls while carrying equipment that remained solid. A computer scientist named Rachel Goldstein interfaced her mind directly with a quantum processor, allowing her to hack enemy systems by thinking in probability clouds rather than binary code. They were becoming something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. On the second day of training, they received a message from the Supremacy. Chancellor Dravix appeared on every screen worldwide, his crystalline face reflecting lights that made human eyes water. You have 5 rotations remaining. Tribute collection points must be established. The first group of 1 million humans must be assembled for processing. Comply or face consequences. The message ended, but this time people did not panic. Word had spread through classified channels that humanity was preparing something. Across the world, military forces mobilized not to surrender, but to support an operation that officially did not exist. Professor Okonkwo worked with Grace Obi, who had been recruited after her brilliant analysis of the Supremacy broadcast. Together, they developed countermeasures against alien communication technology ways to jam their signals or feed them false information. Grace had a gift for thinking sideways, for finding solutions that existed outside normal parameters. She reminded Okonkwo why he had become a teacher. Young minds unencumbered by assumptions about what was impossible often saw paths that experienced experts missed. Priya Sharma solved a critical problem on the third day. The entropy fields would age the supremacy ships, but they needed more time to ensure complete system failure. She designed a resonance cascade that would amplify the temporal distortion, turning 2 minutes of accelerated time into 20,000 years. Dr. Yuki Tanaka called it brilliant madness. The kind of solution you only find when you stop asking if something can be done and start asking how to make it happen. In the armory, soldiers trained with weapons that redefined warfare. Rifles that fired bullets existing in quantum uncertainty, hitting targets before the trigger was pulled, because the shot existed in all possible timelines simultaneously. Grenades that did not explode, but instead convinced matter in their blast radius to forget how to maintain molecular bonds. Blades made from folded spacetime that cut through anything by separating it into different dimensions. Director Cross watched her teams prepare and felt something she had not experienced in years. Pride mixed with terror. They were ready, but ready for what? An enemy that had destroyed civilizations spanning thousands of years? She thought about her decision 17 years ago to begin Project Starfire. People had called her paranoid, wasteful, dangerously obsessed. Now those same people were depending on her paranoia to save the world. Nathan Cross ran final calculations, his fingers flying across holographic keyboards. The probability matrices were favorable, but not certain. 87% chance the Phantom Fleet would successfully deploy. 73% chance the entropy fields would function as designed. 61% chance all boarding teams would survive. He did not share the final number. 9% chance humanity would survive the next week if anything went seriously wrong. But 9% was infinitely better than 0, which is what they would have without Project Starfire. Captain Park gathered his crew for a final briefing. Besides Emma Bradshaw, he had 3 specialists. A navigator named Hassan Farid, who could see quantum probability paths like roads on a map. A systems engineer named Sophie Dubois, who could repair technology by understanding its quantum blueprint. A combat specialist named Kenji Yamamoto, whose reflexes had been enhanced to process information 3 times faster than normal human perception. They were not just a crew. They were humanity's best chance riding in a ship that should not exist. The last night before the assault, people dealt with impending battle in different ways. Some wrote letters to families they might never see again. Others prayed to various gods, hoping someone was listening. Professor Okonkwo sat with Grace Obi in the facility's observation deck, watching stars through reinforced windows. She asked him if he was afraid. He told her the truth. He was terrified, but terror was honest. What scared him more was the idea of not trying, of surrendering humanity's future because the odds seemed impossible. Rebecca Torres stood in the command center, surrounded by screens showing Earth from orbit. Somewhere up there, 12 massive vessels waited to enslave her world. But they had made a fatal mistake. They had assumed humans would react like every other species they had conquered. Fight conventionally or surrender quickly. The supremacy had optimized their tactics for those 2 responses. They had no protocols for an enemy that rewrote the rules of engagement. General Moss conducted one final inspection of the vanguard teams. 200 soldiers in armor that made them look like warriors from humanity's future. Each one had trained for 72 hours straight, learning to use equipment that bent reality around them. They were exhausted and energized, scared and determined. She told them something her grandfather had told her before he died. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is deciding that something matters more than your fear. Today, humanity matters more. The countdown reached its final hour. Director Cross stood before her assembled forces in the main hangar. Hundreds of people who had worked in secret for years, who had built impossible things, who had prepared for a day they hoped would never come. She did not give them a rousing speech about glory or destiny. Instead, she told them the truth. We do not know if this will work. We are attempting something unprecedented against an enemy that has never lost. Many of us will probably die. But here is what I know absolutely. The supremacy came to our world expecting sheep. They are about to meet wolves. The Phantom Fleet lifted off from underground hangars hidden across 3 continents. 37 ships that existed in quantum uncertainty, crewed by humans who had learned to think in probabilities instead of certainties. They rose toward orbit in patterns that defied tracking, their positions uncertain, until the moment of observation collapsed their wave functions into reality. Captain Park felt his vessel respond to his thoughts. The boundary between pilot and ship blurring in ways that should have been disturbing, but felt natural high above. The supremacy vessels maintained their formation, unaware that their perfect geometric positioning had been analyzed and exploited. They had arranged themselves for maximum planetary bombardment coverage, never imagining they were actually surrounding themselves with angles of attack that prevented mutual support. 12 pyramid ships that had conquered worlds now sat like targets in a shooting gallery designed by prey. They refused to die quietly in the command center. The final seconds counted down. Director Cross stood beside General Moss, both women watching displays that showed their fleet approaching attack positions. Nathan stood at his console, hands steady despite the weight of what came next. Rebecca Torres monitored communications, ready to coordinate the assault across multiple simultaneous battlefields. Professor Okonkwo, Priya Sharma, Dr. Kim, and dozens of others watched from their stations, each person a critical piece of humanity's desperate gambit. The countdown reached 0. Reality took a deep breath. Then the Phantom Fleet dropped out of quantum superposition, and Hell came to visit the celestial supremacy.